I was planning to make a video talking about the customs games browser and the possibility of AI bots coming to MCC into one video, but there is something that we need to talk about with regards to 343's latest update on the custom games browser, which not a lot of people are bringing up. I also want to share my thoughts on 343's approach on the custom games browser, so let's get right into it. Now, I did make a video previously on this topic of what the custom games browser needs to be successful. I highly recommend that you check out that video. To get straight to the point here, while the update gave us a pretty nice insight into the current progress of this feature, we need to specifically talk about this main key point here, which is, will players ever be able to have servers up 24/7 on rotation? In which 343 has responded with, while there is a possibility for servers to run for extended periods of time, we do not have the ability for a server to remain up indefinitely at this time. Although in the same post they also mention, the CGB allows players to jump in and out of public custom game experiences quickly with an emphasis on maximizing time in game. Players will have the ability to create and join public custom multiplayer games of MCC that will initially operate on dedicated servers. Now that we have established that key point, now we need to talk about the differences between having the developers, in this case 343, hosting a dedicated server versus a community hosted server. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with having dedicated servers. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. One of the things that I'm really concerned about with 343 having dedicated servers is, of course, I'm concerned about longevity of how long will these servers last, because if at some point MCC will no longer be, supported by them, which is gonna happen at some point, then what will happen to the servers? If the matchmaking services go offline, then that means the dedicated servers used for custom games will also shut down. Which is also getting into my point from the previous videos about this topic, is the fact that developers, when it comes to dedicated servers, they have the full control of this experience. At any time, they can shut down the servers whenever it's not financially feasible. And of course, when it comes to gameplay, of course, they have the full control of how you want to play the game. And one of the things that they brought up in the blog post itself is regarding the modded content and whether or not it will be available in the CGB. And their response is, we are focused on bringing each game and currently planned phases out ahead of any exploration into adding mods into CGB. Modded content has several additional requirements above and beyond what traditional game and map variants need for support. Now, keep in mind that 343 is the one hosting the dedicated server, and here is the problem. There is no way for modded content to work if 343 is the gatekeeper of these dedicated servers, and this is why it's very important that 343 gives the tools for people to host their own dedicated server, because this is the only way for modded content to work. You see, in Halo Custom Edition, the way you can actually have modded content to work in multiplayer, let's say you don't have the modded map, so what do? Either you can download the maps from the website, whichever that mod came from, or you can jump into the multiplayer server and automatically the game will download the maps for you. That way you don't actually need to jump to different websites to look for the mod that you want to play. You can just simply jump on the multiplayer server and automatically the modded files will be downloaded for you. Now, if we're talking about 343's approach where they're the ones hosting the dedicated server, well, how will this work? Well, there's really no way to upload a modded file to the dedicated server, and to be honest, having 343 hosting this is another burden on them, simply because now they have to pay for additional storage requirements. They also need to get additional bandwidth capacity just to host these modded game files, and really that's not a very practical approach, especially when we're talking about MCC, where I would say the budget is not really allocated for this project and it's more or less for Halo Infinite. So really, I think 343 really needs to give the community the tools to host their own dedicated servers. I mean, look at Minecraft. Mojang gives people the ability to host their own dedicated server. Left 4 Dead 2, you can even download the server files on Steam and you can have a server up and running no problem. Things like that. Even Halo 1 and Halo 2 and even El Dorito has those tools available for people to use. And that's really what I'm trying to get at here with this video, is to bring awareness that we really need to have the tools for the ability for people to host their own dedicated servers, so that way when it comes to modded content and all this stuff, it's going to be much easier to do. Besides that, at least it's a win-win situation for both parties. 343 can save up a lot of money simply by hosting the master server list, and the cost of maintaining servers can be put on by the players. They're the ones that are willing to host these game servers, and nobody will mind. Now that we are done talking about the dedicated servers, let's talk about what is the current progress of the custom games browser in this update. Now, of course, a lot of people are wondering, why is it taking so long for 343 to implement a quote-unquote simple feature such as a custom games browser? In which they responded with, the CGB was announced prior to our work on the PC versions of the Halo Master Chief Collection and the addition of Halo Reach. As we looked at our roadmap and investigated the needs of CGB, we have determined that the additional foundational work in each game and our overall network code was required to deliver this feature at a higher quality. Just to share with you guys as a programmer, I totally understand why 343 is taking 3 years for them to bring the CGB to MCC. I mean, if you look at how MCC was in 2014 to 2018, we all know that the game was broken in that time period. And it was only until 2018 that they decided to fix the game. And you always have to remember that before you add any new features to a game or software, you always have to establish a very good foundation, or a very good code-based foundation. If that foundation isn't very strong, and you decided to add new features on top of that, it's not going to end very well. And I think this is what happened with MCC during its development, where I think they initially wanted to have Halo 2 Anniversary, but what they ended up doing is that they became so ambitious that they wanted to bring all of the Halo games into one singular package. And that in itself has brought many technical challenges that they never anticipated, and that's kind of why MCC was broken on launch. And it stayed that way for about 4 years. Not to mention that Halo has a 20-year history to its code base, so there's a lot of legacy code that they actually have to work with, none of which the developers actually wrote themselves, with the exception of Halo 4. And that's another technical challenge, because you're trying to figure out how this code base works and trying to get it to work the way it's supposed to be. And remember, when you're touching code, there's a likely chance of something breaking. And that's the very nature of programming in general. When you change something, there's a potential of a bug happening somewhere in the system. And that's something that's very hard to avoid. And if we look at MCC right now in its current state, I would say that in the past 3 years they did a fantastic job trying to get the game to be stable enough for them to be working on new features, like bringing new customization options for Halo 3, even Halo 1, mod support, and of course with the CGB, all of which are things that they've been working on for the past 3 years, and it's finally coming into reality. Moving on, I know some people might be disappointed to hear that they will be building in phases, but it's really important to understand. Rolling this feature out in phases helps ensure each game can run well in the new CGB framework. New network functionality is required for each game to support the browser. Essentially, it means that every game in the collection must support a common framework for the CGB to work together. You have to remember that each of these games have like different code bases with different set of technical challenges, so it's not very simple to copy and paste the same system from Halo Reach and maybe apply it to Halo CE or vice versa. It's not that easy, guys. And next up is their decision to start with Halo Reach, and 343 responded with, "We are starting with Halo Reach because it is a good test case for new features we are introducing into the CGB, such as our pre-game phase where players can gather until the minimum specified player count is met that allows the full match to start." And it also makes sense that Halo Reach is actually a very fan favorite for custom games next to Halo 3. And lastly, the important question is whether or not challenges can work in custom games. The answer to that is yes, any challenges that can be completed in the custom games should be completable in the CGB, although they did not specify whether or not this can work with the anti-cheat disabled, so I don't know if we'll actually have any information on that. Before we end the video here, these are some of the screenshots of the CGB. Of course, in the main menu, there will be a new tab for the CGB, then inside of that, there will be two buttons, one for browse and one for create. Here we have the server list that shows the session name, game type, map and number of maps and rotation, number of players in the session, and ping. Then if you select one of these servers, you will be presented with this user interface that shows the session details, which shows you a bunch of information like what maps are being rotated, minimum and maximum players, and so on. In the create section, you can pick one game and you'll be presented to set up a session name, minimum players, max players, region, whether to repeat or not, allow team changing, as well as picking the maps and game variants to play. There you have it, that's the entire update on the custom games browser, and 343 is saying that it is possible that we may test this feature, I think this coming Thursday. As always, do keep in mind that all of this is subject to change, including the flight schedule. In the next video, I'll talk about the potential of AI bots coming to MCC because they mention here that they are currently using it for testing purposes. Anyways, thank you guys for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Cause I like to be myself. If you're not agree, you can walk away. You can walk away. You can walk away. Something in my mind. Place me then, I ain't nobody perfect.